The cargo hold of the stellar wind hummed with its usual mechanical symphony, but Captain Jonathan Reed knew something was different. 20 years of deep space hauling had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, they were screaming that he wasn't alone. He adjusted the magnetic boots that kept him anchored in the low gravity and swept his handheld scanner across the towering stacks of cargo containers. A flicker of movement caught his eye between the shadows of 2 containers. Jonathan's hand instinctively moved to the stunner at his hip, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he called out, "I know you're there. Come out slowly, and we can talk about this civilly." The silence stretched for several heartbeats before a figure emerged from the darkness. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. The being before him stood slightly shorter than an average human, with skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, like moonlight on water. Her large, almond-shaped eyes glowed with a soft silver radiance, and what appeared to be hair floated around her head in ethereal tendrils of living light. Illuminari. Jonathan had heard stories about them, but he'd never seen one in person. They were rare in human space, their species preferring isolation after centuries of being hunted for their unique biological properties. The story said their bodies contained elements that could enhance technological systems, making them targets for those who valued profit over life. "I mean no harm," the Luminari spoke in perfect standard English, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in Jonathan's chest. "I seek only passage to the outer rim." Jonathan studied her carefully. Her simple clothing was worn but clean, and she carried herself with a dignity that spoke of education and refinement, despite her current circumstances. "I'm Captain Jonathan Reed. This is my ship, and you're currently a stowaway on it. That's a serious offense." "I am Thura," she replied, lifting her chin slightly. "And yes, I am aware of the laws I have broken. I had no choice." A sound from above made them both freeze. The cargo hold's access hatch cycled open, and Officer Reza's voice echoed down, "Captain?" The automated systems flagged an anomaly in the hold. "Everything all right down there?" Jonathan made a split-second decision that would change his life forever. "All clear, Reza. Just a faulty sensor reading. I'm running a diagnostic now." "Copy that, Captain." The hatch cycled closed. Thura's eyes widened slightly, the silver light in them pulsing with surprise. "You did not report me." "Not yet," Jonathan replied, crossing his arms. "But you owe me an explanation. The truth, please. Why are you really here?" Thura's luminescence dimmed slightly, and Jonathan noticed faint scars on her wrists, barely visible against her shimmering skin. The implications made his jaw clench. "I escaped," she said simply. "From a research facility on New Singapore. They..." She paused, the light patterns in her skin shifting to darker hues. "They were not conducting research. They were harvesting us." Jonathan felt a cold anger settle in his stomach. He'd heard rumors of black market operations involving alien trafficking, but having proof standing right in front of him made it real in a way that stories never could. "How many others?" 17, Thura replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I was the only one strong enough to break free when the power failed during a system maintenance cycle. The others..." Her voice trailed off, the pain evident in her dimming radiance. Jonathan ran a hand through his graying hair, weighing his options. His ship, the Stellar Wind, was a simple cargo hauler. He transported legitimate goods between colonies and space stations, maintaining a clean record and staying out of trouble. That's how he'd survived this long in the competitive shipping business. Taking on a fugitive alien would complicate things considerably. But looking at Thura, seeing the hope and fear warring in her otherworldly eyes, Jonathan knew he couldn't turn her in. His parents hadn't raised him to walk away from someone in need, no matter the risk. "The Stellar Wind isn't exactly a luxury liner," he said finally. "But I can get you to the outer rim. There are people there, people who might be able to help with your situation. And your people. The light patterns in Thera's skin shifted again, hope brightening her natural glow. You would risk this? For a stranger? An alien? Jonathan smiled slightly. Let's just say I've never been fond of chains, no matter who they're on. He gestured toward the back of the cargo hold. There's a secure storage compartment behind my private quarters. It's shielded from most scans, and I'm the only one with access. You'll be safe there until we clear the inner system checkpoints. As they made their way through the dimly lit hold, Jonathan felt the weight of his decision settling on his shoulders. He was now involved in something much bigger than simple cargo hauling. But watching Thera move ahead of him, her natural luminescence casting gentle shadows on the metal walls, he knew it was the right choice. What he didn't know was that this encounter would spark a chain of events that would shake the foundations of human-alien relations, expose a vast criminal enterprise, and challenge everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and the true meaning of freedom. The stellar wind cruised through the darkness of space, its engines humming a steady rhythm that had become as familiar to Jonathan as his own heartbeat. 3 days had passed since he discovered Thera in his cargo hold, and each day brought new revelations about his mysterious passenger. He found her in the secure compartment, sitting cross-legged on the makeshift bed he'd arranged, her natural bioluminescence dimmed to a soft glow. Around her, tiny points of light danced in the air like fireflies, responding to her meditation. Jonathan paused in the doorway, mesmerized by the display. Your emotions are very loud, Captain, Thera said without opening her eyes. The floating lights pulsed in sync with her words. They ripple through the energy field like stones dropped in still water. Jonathan set down the tray of food he'd brought. I didn't realize you could sense emotions so clearly. Must be overwhelming at times. Thera's eyes opened, silver light meeting his gaze. It can be. Especially among humans. Your species feels things so intensely. She gestured to the space beside her. Would you like to learn how we perceive the world? Jonathan hesitated only briefly before sitting down. Their knees almost touched, and he could feel a subtle warmth emanating from her luminescent skin. I thought the Luminari kept their abilities secret. Usually, yes, Thera admitted. But you've trusted me with your ship, your safety. Trust should be reciprocal. She reached out, her slender fingers stopping just short of his temples. May I? Jonathan nodded, and Thera's fingertips made contact with his skin. The world exploded into color and sensation. Suddenly, he could see the energy fields she'd mentioned, flowing currents of light and emotion that permeated everything. The ship's systems glowed with mechanical precision, but it was the emotional energies that took his breath away. He could see his own feelings as a swirling aurora of blues and golds, mixing with Thera's silver radiance where they touched. This is how you see everything, he whispered, awestruck. Yes, Thera replied, her voice carrying an undertone of melancholy. It's also why we were targeted. Our ability to perceive and interact with energy fields makes us valuable to those who would exploit us. They believe they can use our biology to enhance their technology. The connection faded as she lowered her hands, but Jonathan's world felt forever changed. He understood now why the traffickers wanted to harvest the Luminari's unique properties. But he also understood something far more important, the profound beauty and sensitivity of their way of experiencing life. The facility where they held you, he said carefully, watching the light patterns in her skin shift at the mention of it. Tell me about it. The more I know, the better chance we have of helping the others. Thera's luminescence dimmed slightly, but she nodded. It was disguised as a private research institution on New Singapore's southern continent. The public areas are legitimate, but underground. She closed her eyes, her light patterns turning darker. They kept us in specially designed cells that dampened our energy perception. They extracted samples regularly. Some of us didn't survive the procedures. Jonathan's fists clenched involuntarily. Who runs it? A corporation called Nexus Dynamics, Thera replied. But they're just the public face. Behind them is a network of powerful individuals from multiple species. They call themselves the Consortium. A warning alarm blared through the ship's speakers, interrupting their conversation. Jonathan jumped to his feet, accessing the nearest terminal. His face hardened as he read the display. Patrol vessel approaching, he announced. New Singapore authorities. They're requesting permission to board for a routine inspection. Thera's light patterns shifted to sharp, anxious pulses. They're looking for me. Jonathan's mind raced through options. The secure compartment's shielding would hide Thera from standard scans, but if they brought specialized equipment. Can you sense their intentions? Thera closed her eyes, extending her perception. 3 minds on the patrol ship. 2 are simply following orders, but 1. Her eyes snapped open, fear evident in their silver depths. 1 is connected to the Consortium. They know I'm in this sector. Jonathan made a quick decision. We're not going to let them board. Hold on tight. He sprinted to the bridge, plotting a new course even as he dropped into the pilot's seat. The patrol vessel's commander appeared on the main screen. Captain Reed, power down your engines and prepare for boarding. Sorry, Commander, Jonathan replied with a grim smile. Got a time-sensitive delivery. Can't afford any delays. His fingers flew over the controls, initiating a series of system overrides he'd hoped never to use. The Stellar Wind's engines roared to life, pushing them toward a dense asteroid field. The patrol vessel immediately gave chase, but Jonathan hadn't spent 20 years in deep space without learning a few tricks. He weaved through the tumbling rocks with practiced skill, using their mass to disrupt the patrol ship's targeting systems. Thera appeared on the bridge, bracing herself against the wall as the ship shuddered. They're charging weapons. Not for long, Jonathan muttered. He lined up his shot carefully, then fired the ship's mining laser at a specific point on a massive asteroid. The concentrated beam carved into the rock surface, triggering a cascade of debris that forced the patrol vessel to break off pursuit. As they emerged from the asteroid field, Jonathan plotted a series of rapid jumps through different shipping lanes, effectively losing their pursuers. Only when they were safely hidden in the shadow of a gas giant did he allow himself to relax. Thera placed a hand on his shoulder, and through the contact, he could feel her gratitude and concern mixing with his own adrenaline-fueled emotions. You risked everything, she said softly. Your ship, your career. Some things are worth the risk, Jonathan replied, covering her hand with his own. The silver light where their skin touched seemed to pulse brighter. But we need to be smarter going forward. The consortium's reach is longer than we thought. As they sat together in the dim light of the bridge, watching the gas giants swirling storms through the viewscreen, both knew their journey had just become far more dangerous, and far more important. The consortium's influence meant this was bigger than just a rescue mission. They were now part of a struggle that could reshape the relationship between humans and Luminari forever. The neon-lit underbelly of Asteria Station pulsed with life and secrets. Jonathan led Thera through winding corridors, her luminescence carefully dampened beneath a hooded cloak. They'd spent the last week dodging patrols and following encoded transmissions that led them here, to the edge of civilized space. Are you certain about this contact? Thera whispered, her silver eyes scanning the crowds of humans and aliens that filled the station's lower levels. As certain as anyone can be out here, Jonathan replied, his hand never straying far from his concealed stunner. Zara's been running the network for years. If anyone can help us expose the consortium, it's her. They turned down a narrower passage, eventually stopping before a shop front advertising vintage Earth artifacts. The window displayed a bizarre collection of items, ancient computer parts, preserved paper books, and what appeared to be a plastic flamingo. Jonathan pressed his palm against a seemingly random panel beside the door, and after a moment, it slid open silently. Inside, the shop was a maze of shelves crammed with Earth relics. A tall figure emerged from behind a counter, and Thera instinctively tensed. The woman before them had cybernetic augmentations visible along her temples and neck, and her left eye glowed with a soft blue light. "Jonathan Reed," Zara said, her organic eye crinkling with warmth while her cybernetic one scanned them both. "Still flying that rust bucket of yours?" "The stellar wind's gotten me this far," Jonathan smiled, then grew serious. "We need your help, Zara. It's bigger than we thought." Zara's expression hardened. She gestured toward a door behind the counter. "Follow me. And watch your step, some of these artifacts are actually worth something." They descended a spiral staircase into a hidden complex beneath the shop. The space was filled with advanced communication equipment and holographic displays showing various star systems. Several beings of different species worked at terminals, monitoring communications and coordinating what appeared to be multiple ongoing operations. "Welcome to the Sanctuary Network," Zara announced, pride evident in her voice. "We've been fighting trafficking operations across 3 sectors, but lately, we've noticed a pattern. Your consortium friends have been busy." She activated a large holographic display, showing a map of known space. Red dots appeared, marking locations of suspected trafficking operations. "Each of these points represents a facility similar to the one you escaped from," she told Thera. "They're all connected to Nexus Dynamics shell companies." Thera moved closer to the display, her light patterns shifting with distress. "There are so many. And those are just the ones we know about," Zara said grimly. "But your escape caused ripples. The consortium is moving their assets, including the other Luminari prisoners. We intercepted communications indicating they're planning a mass transfer within the next 2 weeks." Jonathan studied the map intently. "Where are they taking them?" Zara tapped a sequence into the console, and a new location illuminated. A deep space facility near the Maelstrom Nebula. "It's heavily defended and officially doesn't exist. Getting in will be nearly impossible." "Nothing's impossible," a new voice interrupted. They turned to see a massive Krylonian approaching, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light. "Especially not with what I've been working on." "This is Rax," Zara introduced him. "Our resident genius when it comes to breaking into places we're not supposed to be." The Krylonian's faceted eyes focused on Thera. "Your species' energy manipulation abilities, they can interface with technology, yes?" Thera nodded cautiously. "To some degree. It's how I escaped the facility on New Singapore. But it's dangerous, prolonged contact with complex systems can be overwhelming. What if you had help?" Rax pulled up schematics on a nearby terminal. "I've been developing a neural buffer, designed to protect sensitive beings from system feedback. With modifications, it could allow you to interface with security systems safely." "You want to use me as a key," Thera realized, her luminescence flickering with understanding. "More like a ghost in their machine," Rax corrected. "The consortium's facility uses quantum-encrypted systems. But with your unique abilities and my buffer, you could slip through their defenses like they don't exist." Jonathan stepped forward protectively. "It's too dangerous. We can find another way." "There isn't another way," Thera said softly, placing her hand on his arm. Through the contact, he felt her determination and fear, but also her resolve. 17 of my people are still prisoners, Jonathan. How many others are suffering in these facilities? We have to try." Zara watched their interaction with knowing eyes. "The network can provide support, distractions, false leads, escape routes. But the core team needs to be small. Quick. Undetectable." "I'm coming with you," Jonathan stated, his tone brooking no argument. "My ship, my crew." "Your crew." Thurah's light patterns shifted to a warmer hue, a subtle smile playing at her lips. "Well, you're not exactly a paying passenger anymore," he replied, returning her smile before turning back to Zara. "What's our timeline?" The next hour was spent in intense planning. Rax worked with Thurah to calibrate the neural buffer while Zara and Jonathan mapped out approach vectors and escape routes. The Sanctuary Network's resources were extensive, but they all knew they were planning to strike at something massive and dangerous. As they finally prepared to leave, Zara pulled Jonathan aside. "The consortium has people everywhere, Jonathan. High-ranking officials, corporate leaders, even some in the military. If they catch you—" "They won't," he interrupted firmly. Zara's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on him. "You're in love with her, aren't you?" Jonathan glanced at Thurah, who was deep in conversation with Rax about the neural buffer specifications. Her natural radiance seemed to fill the room with a gentle light that made everything else look dim in comparison. "Does it matter?" he asked quietly. "It might be the only thing that does," Zara replied. "Love has a way of changing the odds." She pressed a small data chip into his hand. "Emergency frequencies, safe houses, and a few other surprises. Don't make me regret this, old friend." As they made their way back through the crowded station corridors toward the Stellar Wind's docking bay, Jonathan felt the weight of their mission settling on his shoulders. They were about to challenge one of the most powerful criminal organizations in known space, armed with little more than hope, determination, and each other. But watching Thurah walk beside him, her presence a constant reminder of everything worth fighting for, Jonathan knew he wouldn't have it any other way. The path ahead was dangerous, possibly fatal, but it was also right. Sometimes, he reflected, that had to be enough. The Maelstrom Nebula lived up to its name, its swirling clouds of purple and green gas creating treacherous navigation conditions. The stellar wind drifted silently through the chaos, its systems running at minimal power to avoid detection. In the dimmed bridge, Jonathan watched Thurah make final adjustments to the neural buffer device secured around her neck. "The interference from the nebula should help mask our approach," he said, checking the ship's sensors again. "But once we're inside their security perimeter, we'll have minutes at most before they detect us." Thurah's fingers traced the sleek metal of the buffer, her luminescence reflecting off its surface. "Rax's calculations suggest I'll have approximately 8 minutes of safe connection time with their systems. After that, the feedback could become problematic." Jonathan moved closer, catching her hand in his. "You don't have to do this. We could wait, find another way." "They're moving the prisoners tomorrow," Thurah interrupted gently. "This is our only chance." Her silver eyes met his, and through their touch, he felt her emotions, fear tangled with determination, hope wrapped in resolve, and something deeper, warmer, when she looked at him. The ship's proximity alert suddenly flashed red. A massive structure was materializing through the nebulous haze, the consortium's secret facility. It resembled a black spider web spun between asteroids, with a central hub protected by multiple layers of defense systems. "Multiple weapons platforms detected," the ship's AI announced. "Scanning, unusual energy signatures present. Caution advised." Jonathan squeezed Thurah's hand once before moving to the pilot station. "Ready?" She nodded, taking her position at the modified console Rax had installed. "Remember, once I'm connected, I won't be able to communicate normally. Watch my light patterns, if they turn red. I pull you out immediately," Jonathan finished. "I remember." They approached from the nebula's densest region, using the natural phenomena to mask their heat signature. Jonathan's hands flew over the controls, making minute adjustments to keep them in the sensor shadows of the larger asteroids. Years of experience piloting through treacherous conditions were being put to their ultimate test. When they reached the outer defense perimeter, Thurah closed her eyes and placed her hands on the console. Her natural luminescence intensified, and threads of light seemed to flow from her fingers into the ship's systems. The neural buffer around her neck hummed to life, its indicators pulsing in rhythm with her bioluminescence. Through the view screen, Jonathan watched in amazement as security satellites turned away at precisely the right moments, creating a narrow corridor for their approach. Defense platforms remained dormant as they passed, their sensors apparently blind to the stellar wind's presence. Thera was literally becoming one with the facility systems, bending them to her will while staying just beneath their detection thresholds. They were halfway to the central hub when everything went wrong. Thera's light patterns suddenly spiked erratically, and she let out a gasp of pain. Something's fighting back, she managed through clenched teeth. The systems, they're not entirely mechanical. There's another luminary connected to them. Warning klaxons blared as the facility's defense grid came alive. Multiple weapon systems targeting, the AI warned. Enemy vessels launching. We have to abort, Jonathan said, already plotting an escape vector. No. Thera's voice was strained but determined. I can feel them now, all of them. They're using my people to power their security systems. I can reach them. Her luminescence blazed brighter than Jonathan had ever seen, the neural buffer's warning indicators flashing red. Through the view screen, he watched in astonishment as chaos erupted throughout the facility. Defense platforms began firing on each other, airlocks cycled randomly, and security doors slammed open and closed. Energy surge detected in the central hub, the AI reported. Prison containment systems are failing. Thera's light patterns were shifting dangerously toward red. The others, they're helping me now. We're overloading the systems together, but the feedback. She cried out in pain. Jonathan's heart felt like it was being torn in two. Every instinct screamed at him to pull her away from the console, to protect her from the damage the neural overload could cause. But he knew she would never forgive him if he stopped her now. Emergency transmission incoming, the AI announced. Multiple escape pods launching from the central hub. That's them, Thera gasped. The prisoners, they're escaping. I can feel their minds. Her voice trailed off as her knees buckled. Jonathan lunged forward, catching her as she collapsed. Her skin was burning hot to the touch, her light patterns flickering weakly. The neural buffer sparked and died, smoke curling from its circuits. Multiple hostile vessels approaching, the AI warned. Consortium security forces responding to the breakout. Jonathan carried Thera to the co-pilot's seat, strapping her in while his mind raced through options. The escape pods would be easy targets for the consortium's ships. The escapees would need cover, but providing it would mean flying straight into the teeth of the enemy fleet. He looked at Thera, unconscious but still glowing faintly, then at the approaching enemy vessels. The choice, he realized, wasn't really a choice at all. Send an emergency signal to Zara, he ordered the AI. Tell her to be ready with that backup plan she promised. Then divert all power to weapons and shields. He took the pilot's controls, a grim smile touching his lips. Time to show these consortium bastards how a cargo hauler really fights. The Stellar Wind's engines roared to full power as Jonathan piloted directly into the heart of the battle, determined to protect the escaped prisoners at any cost. As laser fire filled the space around them, he spared one glance at Thera's unconscious form. Hold on, he whispered, both to her and to himself. This isn't over yet. The Maelstrom Nebula erupted in a spectacular display of weapons fire and explosions. The stellar wind weaved through the chaos, its hull scorched and sparking but still fighting. Jonathan's hands danced across the controls, turning the cargo ship's bulk into an advantage as he used its reinforced frame to shield the fleeing escape pods. Shield integrity at 30%, the AI warned. Hull breaches detected in sectors 7 and 12. Reroute emergency power to the shields, Jonathan ordered, executing a desperate roll to avoid a barrage of plasma torpedoes. He risked a glance at Thera, still unconscious beside him, her luminescence flickering like a candle in the wind. Suddenly, new alerts flashed across his screens. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace, the AI announced. Signatures match Sanctuary Network vessels. Through the viewscreen, Jonathan watched as a fleet of ships emerged from hyperspace, everything from modified freighters to decommissioned military vessels. Zara's backup plan had arrived. "This is Commander Ven of the Sanctuary Fleet," a stern voice announced on all frequencies. "Consortium vessels, power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. We have transmitted evidence of your illegal activities to every major news network in 3 sectors. It's over." The battle's momentum shifted instantly. Caught between the Sanctuary Fleet and the evidence of their crimes being broadcast across the galaxy, many consortium ships began powering down. Others tried to flee, only to be disabled by precise shots from the resistance vessels. A familiar voice came through on a private channel. "Still alive, old friend?" Zara asked, her ship pulling alongside the stellar wind. "You look like you could use some help." "Better late than never," Jonathan replied, managing a tired smile. "We've got injured aboard, and the escape pods need immediate medical attention." "Already on it. We've got ships collecting the pods now. Transmitting coordinates for a secure medical facility." "And Jonathan? You might want to turn on the news feeds. This is going to change everything." As the Sanctuary Fleet secured the area, Jonathan set course for the coordinates Zara provided. The stellar wind's engines protested but held together, carrying them away from the nebula's chaos. He engaged the autopilot and moved quickly to Thura's side, checking her vital signs. Her eyes fluttered open as he touched her face, their silver light dim but steady. "The others," she whispered. "Safe," he assured her, his voice thick with emotion. "You did it. They're all safe." A weak smile touched her lips, and her hand found his. Through the contact, he felt her relief and exhaustion, but also a surge of joy that made her luminescence brighten momentarily. Hours later, in a hidden medical facility on a moon with no name, Jonathan stood at a window watching ships come and go. Behind him, Thura slept peacefully, her strength slowly returning. The neural overload had been severe, but the doctors were confident she would make a full recovery. The door slid open, and Zara entered, her cybernetic eye glowing with satisfaction. "The news is spreading faster than we could have hoped. The consortium's political allies are falling over themselves to deny any connection. Arrests have already begun." "And the other Luminari?" Jonathan asked. "All 17 accounted for, plus 32 other beings we didn't even know were being held there. They're getting medical care and counseling. Several have already agreed to testify." She paused, studying him. "The Luminari High Council has broken their isolation policy. They're sending representatives to meet with human authorities. They're calling for new treaties, protection agreements. It's really happening," Jonathan mused. "Everything's changing. Thanks to you too," Zara said softly. "Speaking of which." She handed him a data pad. "Your cargo hauling license has been revoked. The authorities couldn't exactly ignore your involvement in all this." Jonathan took the pad, unsurprised. "Small price to pay." "That's what I thought you'd say." Zara grinned. "Which is why I've got another option for you. The Sanctuary Network is expanding, becoming legitimate. We need captains we can trust. People who aren't afraid to do what's right, no matter the cost." She glanced meaningfully at Thura's sleeping form. "The position comes with a full pardon and dual citizenship papers, if you're interested." "For both of you." Before Jonathan could respond, a soft voice interrupted. "He's interested." They turned to see Thura awake, her luminescence steadily growing stronger. Jonathan moved to her side, taking her hand. Am I?" "Yes," she said firmly, her silver eyes bright with amusement and love. After all, someone needs to help protect the new treaties between our peoples. Who better than those who brought them together? Zara quietly excused herself as Jonathan sat on the edge of Thura's bed. You know, he said, I never planned on becoming a symbol of interspecies cooperation. And I never planned on falling in love with a human cargo hauler, Thura replied, her free hand touching his face. Her luminescence pulsed brighter, and through their connection, Jonathan felt the depth of her emotions, the strength of their bond. What happens now? He asked softly. Thura's light patterns shifted to warm, hopeful colors. Now we help build something new. Together. Outside the window, ships continued their dance against the star-filled sky. Among them were vessels from a dozen worlds, former enemies working side by side. On news channels across the galaxy, the story of a human captain and a Luminari refugee was sparking discussions about change, about justice, about the power of choosing to do what's right. And in a quiet medical room on a nameless moon, two beings from different worlds held each other close, their love a testament to the truth that had driven them from the start, that real freedom comes not just from breaking chains, but from helping others break theirs as well. Their story would be told for generations, not just as a tale of revolution or romance, but as proof that the strongest bonds aren't forged by power or fear, but by courage, compassion, and the willingness to see the light in others, even in the darkest of spaces.